power changes your brain. Literally. Hello, curious minds. Ever wondered why that friend who got promoted at work suddenly seems different? Or why politicians sometimes seem to be living on another planet? Today we're going on a mind-blowing journey, not into politics, but deep inside our own brains to answer a question that affects us all. Does having power change who we are? I promise that by the end of this video, you'll never look at a leader, a boss, or even yourself the same way again. Let's start with something we've all heard. The famous quote, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." It's an idea so powerful we almost accept it as a law of nature. We see someone reach the top, and sooner or later we expect them to slip up, to become arrogant. And we see it on a small scale, right? Think of the restaurant manager who yells at a waiter for a tiny mistake. Or that person who, after getting a little authority, suddenly stops saying please and thank you. Power seems to give people a pass to skip the most basic social rules the rest of us follow every day. But this idea isn't new. It has deep evolutionary roots. Imagine our ancestors on the savannah. The tribe's leader couldn't be worried about every single individual's feelings. Their brain had to be 100% focused on the major threats and opportunities, finding food, fending off a predator, planning the next migration. It was a matter of survival. Power at its core demanded an almost obsessive focus on goals, not people. All of this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's what we see on the surface, the obvious behavior. But if this is what we see, what secret drivers, what invisible circuits in our brain are pulling the strings underneath? This is where the real adventure begins. The first major revelation, backed by fascinating neuroscience studies, is this: power diminishes empathy, and that's not a metaphor. The activity in certain parts of our brain associated with empathy, what's known as the mirror neuron system, which is basically the brain's network for feeling what others feel, literally decreases. It's as if the powerful person's brain starts to see others not as people with their own hopes and fears, but as tools or abstract concepts for achieving a goal. And knowing this is an incredible double-edged sword. On one hand, it helps you spot the danger. If you notice a leader, a boss, or even a friend with new authority starting to interrupt constantly, failing to make eye contact, or talking about people as human resources or pieces on a chessboard, that's a giant red flag. It's a sign their empathy circuit is shutting down. But on the other hand, it allows you to identify excellence. If you see someone in a position of power who deliberately takes the time to listen, who asks about your day and actually waits for the answer, who remembers personal details, that person is actively fighting this neurological tendency. And that, my friends, is the mark of a true leader. This is all governed by an invisible rule in our brain, the law of least effort. Our brain is designed to be efficient, to conserve energy, and thinking from someone else's perspective, feeling what they feel, that uses a lot of energy. When you have power, you suddenly have the luxury of not needing to do it as often. It's like driving a car. You don't think about the lives, dreams, and problems of every driver around you. You see them as obstacles or allies in getting to your destination. Power can turn social life into a highway. This cognitive laziness leads us straight to a design flaw in the brain called the overconfidence bias. It's the tendency to believe we're smarter, more skilled, and more correct than we actually are. Power acts as an amplifier for this bias. The strategy to fight it? It's called the internal devil's advocate. Before making a big decision, especially if you're in power, force yourself to actively find 3 solid reasons why you might be completely wrong. Force your brain to step out of its comfort zone and consider other perspectives. The Romans, in fact, had an incredible custom. When a victorious general paraded through Rome, a slave would stand behind him, whispering in his ear, "Remember that you are mortal." Think about that for a second. It was a psychological technology to counteract the effects of power. The lesson for us today is that ancient wisdom already knew that power needs an anchor, a constant reminder of our own humanity and fragility to keep us from soaring into arrogance. If you understand all this, the most important real-life takeaway is this: power doesn't corrupt you by turning you into someone else. No, power gives you permission to stop making the effort to be your best self. It allows your worst impulses, your laziness and selfishness, which we all have, to come out and play without the social restraints that normally keep them in check. We've looked at the biology, the psychology. It seems like we have a clear answer, right? Well, if you thought that understanding the neuroscience meant we had it all figured out, get ready, because this is where the story descends into total chaos. And the first major controversy is it the person's fault or the system's? One side says the problem is individuals, that some people are predisposed to tyranny and power simply gives them the chance to show their true colors. The other side argues that no, even the kindest person can be corrupted by a poorly designed system. What's at stake is fundamental. For the first side, it's personal responsibility. For the second, it's the urgent need to redesign our organizations and governments. Now let's challenge a popular belief, the myth of the natural-born leader, the idea that some people are just born to rule. The truth is, most leadership skills are learned. But why do we love to believe in this myth? Because it simplifies the world. It gives us a hero to follow, absolves us of the responsibility to think critically, and most importantly, it takes away the pressure of having to lead ourselves. And here we arrive at a wonderful and cruel paradox. To gain power, you often need to be empathetic, collaborative, and charming. You have to convince people you're on their side. But the moment you get the power, that very power begins to neurologically erode the exact qualities that got you to the top. It's a dilemma with no easy solution. The path to power prepares you, but the destination undoes you. This leads us to an ethical question we almost never ask ourselves. We take it for granted that hierarchies are necessary, that we need bosses and leaders, but if science is showing us that these structures carry an inherent risk of neurologically damaging the empathy and judgment of the people we put at the top, is it ethical to keep building our companies and societies this way without putting much stronger safeguards in place? This debate, moreover, has changed over time. Centuries ago, the controversy was about the divine right of kings, a power supposedly granted by God. Today, the debate is about the invisible biases in the algorithms that decide who gets a job or a loan. The language changes, the technology changes, but the central question about unchecked power remains exactly the same. At its heart, power confronts us with an unsolvable problem of the human condition. We crave the security and order that good leadership can bring, but at the same time, we live with a primal fear of the tyranny that same power can unleash. Our history as a species is the story of trying to strike that balance and almost always failing. As you can see, the reality is far more complex and chaotic than a simple power corrupts. You've survived the chaos. Now it's time to look at the finer details, the discoveries that separate the curious from the true connoisseurs of human behavior. Here's a fact for the true knowledge gourmets. Researchers like Dasher Keltner at UC Berkeley talk about hubris syndrome, from the ancient Greek hybris, meaning excessive pride. They don't see it as just a character flaw, but an acquired syndrome with clear symptoms, a contempt for advice, a loss of contact with reality, and an almost messianic faith in one's own judgment. They describe it almost as a temporary power-induced personality disorder. To understand a key brain mechanism, let's use an analogy. Think of a part of your brain called the orbitofrontal cortex. It's like the CEO of your impulses. It reviews your wildest ideas and says, no, that's a terrible idea, don't do it. Power is like a constant stream of incredibly positive reports and applause flooding the CEO's office. Over time, it gets cocky, stops listening to other departments, and starts approving increasingly risky and impulsive decisions. And we have to talk about an unsung hero in this story, Dasher Keltner himself. In a now classic study you could call the Cookie Monster study, he brought together groups of 3 students. One of them was randomly assigned the role of leader. Halfway through the task, they brought in a plate with 4 cookies. Can you guess what happened almost every time? The leader not only ate the extra 4th cookie, but did so more sloppily, chewing with their mouth open and leaving crumbs everywhere. A tiny bit of power made up in a lab was enough to change their behavior. But there's a fascinating and slightly rebellious alternative theory. Some social psychologists suggest that power doesn't so much change a person as it acts as a liberator. They argue that our personalities and tendencies are already there, but social life forces us to suppress them. Power doesn't turn you into a jerk. It just gives you the freedom to stop pretending you aren't one. And here comes a completely counterintuitive detail from the research. Our intuition tells us that power would make us more aware, more attentive. Wrong? Studies show that people with power are worse at detecting others' feelings in photographs or guessing what the person they're talking to is thinking. Instead of sharpening our social senses, power seems to dull them. And the final detail that connects everything is the neurotransmitter dopamine, the molecule of pleasure and reward. Every time you make a decision and it goes well, your brain gets a hit of dopamine. When you have power, you make more decisions, and people often tell you they're great. Your brain starts swimming in dopamine. Power can become literally addictive. And like any addiction, it pushes you to seek ever larger doses, to take bigger risks, ignoring the consequences for others. It's no longer psychology, it's pure biochemistry. This level of detail gives us a much richer and frankly more compassionate view. It's not about good guys and bad guys, but about predictable human brains reacting to a very potent drug called power. We've reached the edge of what is known. Do you dare to look towards the final frontier? Let's look 100 years into the future. How might this evolve? Imagine governments or companies led not by a human, but by an artificial intelligence programmed with ethical safeguards and infinite empathy. Would that be the solution to corruption and hubris? Or would power find a new way to corrupt even silicon? and here science hits a wall and philosophy must take over. If power alters our perception of reality and our connection to others, is there such a thing as a stable, authentic self? Or are we simply a collection of brain states that change depending on context and the amount of power we hold? Who are you, really? The most dizzying philosophical implication is that power might be one of the clearest proofs that our consciousness isn't a single entity, but a constant negotiation between different parts of our brain. Power doesn't change us. It changes the outcome of that internal negotiation, giving a louder voice to our impulses while silencing empathy. Mastering this knowledge could be key to the future of humanity. Imagine being able to design political, educational, and business systems based on the neuroscience of power, systems with mandatory rotations, with forced feedback mechanisms, with empathy training. We could perhaps have the benefits of leadership without its inherent toxicity. And the final, most provocative idea, maybe the goal shouldn't be to find good leaders. Maybe the goal should be to create systems so robust that they work well even with mediocre or flawed leaders. Perhaps the real goal is to make the personal virtue of the person in charge irrelevant. The journey is over. We've gone from a simple phrase to the biochemistry of our brain and the future of humanity. Now it's time to step back and take in the incredible big picture. At the beginning of this journey, we started from a simple, familiar idea we all know. Power corrupts. A popular truth, almost a saying. And now look where we are. That simple idea has transformed into an understanding that power is a force that rewires the empathy circuits in the brain, amplifies our cognitive biases, can act like an addictive drug on a neurochemical level, and presents us with a cruel paradox. To get it, you need qualities that it will then destroy. We've gone from a simple proverb to the neuroscience of the human condition. What idea from this whole journey struck you the most? The lazy brain, the hubris syndrome, or the cookie monster? Whatever it is, I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. Thank you truly for dedicating your time and attention to this deep dive. If you're fascinated by these explorations that take reality apart to understand it better, subscribe, because we have many more journeys like this one prepared for you. Until next time, always keep questioning what you take for granted. So the final question isn't what you would do with power, but what you are willing to do to not be changed by it.